Hey there! In today's episode, we're going to be talking a lot about coral bleaching. If you're new to this subject, I highly recommend you check out Season 1, Episode 2, where I gave a quick, fun and easy to understand introduction to coral biology, answering questions like, what is coral? What does it need to stay healthy and survive? What does it actually mean when coral bleaches? Can coral recover from bleaching? What's the difference between healthy, bleached and dead coral? What causes coral bleaching? And what can we do to help? If you aren't familiar with these basics, I highly recommend you go back and listen to Season 1, Episode 2, because it will provide valuable background context. If you're ready to dive right into the media misinformation around coral bleaching on the Great Barrier Reef, let's get into today's episode. You're listening to Word on the Reef, diving into marine science on the Great Barrier Reef and beyond, with Tanya Murphy and Brett Goodban. Good morning and welcome to Word on the Reef. I'm your host, diver and marine conservationist Tanya Murphy, and with me, as always, is Cairns Aquarium's marine educator and fish whisperer, Brett Goodban.
Good morning.
Season's greetings.
Yes, Christmas.
And also happy Kurabana, which means wet season in the local Irukandji language. And over the past few days, it has been raining. Mm-hmm. Bats and frogs, raining bats and frogs in earnest, which is exactly what you want to see at this time of year. It's finally broken.
Yep.
So our environment here in far north Queensland doesn't have snow, mistletoe or reindeer, but rather the native trees are flowering and it's nesting time for the turtles, crocodiles and Torres Strait pigeons. It's a season of life, a season of growth and a really beautiful time of year. So I hope all our listeners have some lovely plans for their holidays, preferably plans which involve getting in or underneath the waves. What are your plans for the holidays, Brett?
Well, I'm going to try and consume as much Christmas food as I can, and apart from that, standing in front of fish and talking to them with the guests, I think. Yeah. That's where I'll be.
Yeah, no breaks for the tourism industry.
There's no breaks for us, no.
Everyone's coming in mass to come and see us, which we love.
More the better.
Yeah. Now, folks, this is actually our final show for 2025 before we head off for a break, but... No. Don't worry, we'll be back in February next year with more of the world's best marine science adventures.
We will be.
And before we introduce today's expert guest, I just want to reflect on what has been an incredible year for the show.
Wow, it has.
Can you believe this is our 40th episode, I think, of 2025?
Yep.
And when you add the 16 episodes I recorded last year before you joined me, Brett, and we started at Cairns FM, that makes this the 56th episode.
Wow, look at that.
Word on the Reef overall. That's around 40 hours of deep diving into marine science, going beneath the headlines to understand what's really happening in our oceans, straight from the scientists, divers and traditional owners who are doing the work on the water. This year we've travelled to some of the most remote parts of the Great Barrier Reef, from Lizard Island and Rain Island to Magnetic Island and beyond to Ningaloo Reef in Western Australia and the Great Southern Reef in South Australia. We've explored how to protect everything from octopuses, whales, seals and sea dragons to corals, mangroves, seagrass, sharks and albatrosses and everything else in between.
Wow.
We've been incredibly lucky to speak with some extraordinary guests, from shark tracker Richard Fitzpatrick, Netflix's Aaliyah Barnchick, comedian Kirsty Wiebeck, dugout canoe reef sailor adventurer Mike Atkinson, whale snot collecting drone pilot Christian Miller.
Love that one.
Whale shark researcher Ingo Miller, Irukandji traditional owner Gavin Singleton, coral restoration expert Dr. Katie Chartrand, just to name a few.
Wow.
It's been an absolute privilege to learn from all these experts. So, Brett, for you, looking back on this year, what have some of the highlights been for you?
I think it's probably the connection with the ocean between all the guests. We all have that common connection, don't we? But also, hopefully, that all of our amazing listeners have been able to feel that connection as well and fall in love with the natural world like we do. That's really important.
Yeah, Brett, you've always noticed that common thread where the first question we always ask everyone is, what sparked your connection with the ocean? And everyone's always got a story about the first time that they, dived into the water, and then it just changed their whole life and they fell in love from there. And hopefully the listeners are connecting with that as well and getting some of that ocean love.
Yep.
I also know that a couple of weeks ago you had a really illustrative experience where you had a couple of people come into the aquarium.
Yeah, fans.
Yeah,
actually, we'll call them fans. I've had this
fans, sea fans.
Yeah, sea fans.
Yeah.
I've actually had this a few times actually, but I had this elderly couple come up to me at the touch tank and they said, "Oh, we listened to your shark show. It was amazing." I said, "Thank you." They said, "Oh, are you Brett from the show Word on the Reef? And I went, yeah, that I am he. Well, yes. And they went, oh, my God. They said that they listen to us every week.
Oh, bless them.
And they'd come up on holidays and they...
came straight to find you.
They come to the Cairns Aquarium and we stood there and chatted for ages, and they said that they like to sit down with their cup of tea, and I said, how do you feel when you listen to it? And they said, we feel like we're drifting off. Yeah, it's really nice. We've had quite a lot of people come in, actually, that have... And I've dished out my business card that I have around my neck and my lanyard.
Promoting Word on the Reef further. Yeah, well done.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful to hear of people coming from afar to say hi after listening to our show. Considering that this show is actually a not-for-profit passion project made in our spare time, the growth this year has been huge. The statistic that blows my mind the most, though, is we have listeners in 91 countries.
Stop it.
That's like half of all the countries that exist in the world.
Sorry, so how many was that again?
91 countries.
Okay.
851 cities around the world. So this really shows how interested people are in the Great Barrier Reef, no matter where they're from, and how interested people are in clear, trustworthy information about marine issues straight from the experts that are doing the research.
So there could be someone sitting in their house right now with snow falling outside while we're delivering a show from Cairns.
Well, I can actually look up all the statistics on my podcast tracking app, and it gives me a notification whenever we get a new listener from a new place. So shout out to whoever's listening from West Bend, Wisconsin, Raleigh, North Carolina, West Jordan, Utah, and Buffalo, New York. Actually, those are all USA.
Wow, yeah, they.
We do have 91 countries. They're not always all from America, but shout out to you.
Yeah, thank you guys. I'm all over the world. It just means so much to us to be able to share this with you guys.
Yeah, hello to all of you wherever you're listening from. We'd love to hear from you. Send us a DM.
Send us messages.
Instagram.com/Word on the Reef podcast, and tell us what brought you here and what you'd like to see in 2026 from the show.
And also, if there's any topics that you want to cover, if you're in the marine industry or you're a diver or anything from where you are, please let us know, and we'll pop it on our topic list for sure.
Yes, and a massive big thank you as well to our Patreon supporters.
Yes.
Ari, Reese, Gemma, Emily, Rodney, Nina, Alyssa and Sally. You're absolute legends. And if anyone else would like to help keep the show afloat by joining our Fin Club, you can find us at patreon.com/Word on the Reef podcast. So whether you've listened to every episode or just a few, or if this is your very first time, thank you for choosing to look beyond the news headlines and take a deeper dive into what's really happening on the Great Barrier Reef with those who know it best.
Yes, you're part of our fishy family. Thank you.
We'll be taking a few weeks break after this show, but we'll be back in February, bigger and better than ever.
Massive. It'll be massive.
Just like Cairns Aquarium's Shazza the Maori wrasse, who's just completed their natural life cycle transition from female to male and is now called Shane. Congratulations, big guy. I'm
going to have to change it from Shazza to Shane. I don't know how I'm going to do it.
It's going to trip you up.
It is a couple of times. I'm very proud of him.
And no, we're nowhere near running out of topics. I've still got around 70 experts on my ever-growing interview list, including episodes on sea cucumbers, crown of thorns starfish, dugongs, crocodiles, jellyfish, plus more Indigenous voices, conversations about ocean grief and mental health. And we're also planning a webinar where you can talk to Brett and I live and ask us anything.
Oh, that's cool.
More on that in the new year.
Yep.
But now, let's get into today's topic. Have you ever felt confused by conflicting media reports about the health of the Great Barrier Reef? If so, you're not alone. New research shows that news coverage has often failed to clearly communicate the risks climate change poses to the reef, sometimes fueling misinformation and even climate denial. So why is this happening, and what can be done about it? Joining us to unpack this is Dr. Gabby Mokata, Senior Research Fellow in Climate Science Communication at the University of Tasmania. Dr. Mokata, welcome to Word on the Reef.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and congrats on this great show.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's great to have you on the show. Now, before we dive into the world of media misinformation, can you please tell us a bit about yourself? What's your background, and do you have any connections with the ocean and the Great Barrier Reef?
So I'm joining you from the southern part of Australia. So this morning it's grey and cold in Tasmania in contrast to what you're having up there.
Complete opposite end.
Maybe you can actually go for a sleigh ride.
Possibly. It's not rare for there to be a bit of snow on the top of the summit of Kunani, our beautiful mountain behind the city, on Christmas Day. So
wow.
Oh, that's cool.
So there is actually snow in Australia on Christmas Day somewhere.
There can be. There can be, for sure.
Wow.
So I'm not from here, but I've lived here for 20-something years. And, you know, the thing is, in Tasmania, you can never get that far from the ocean. So my work in communicating climate change and researching how we best do that in this moment of urgency for action on climate change is connected with the ocean in some aspects, mainly because I'm an ocean lover. And you asked when I had that epiphany about the ocean. I mean, I grew up close to the ocean, but I first dived on the Great Barrier Reef at Heron Island as maybe a 20-something-year-old.
Wow.
And was just amazed by what you see under the waves.
Yep.
I love Heron.
It's beautiful. And what you see on land is also incredible. And then the Tuamotu Islands out in the Pacific, I joined some friends on a reef life survey boat. And while they were doing their surveys, I was just hovering around, looking at the reef and having some incredible dives. So, you know, a few kind of ocean epiphanies where I just realised how crucial this all is to the circularity of life on our amazing planet. And so I've always been interested in life under the ocean, but I'm not a marine specialist. I'm more of a social scientist when it comes to climate change.
Yep.
Well, in order to understand how to help the planet, we need to understand people. That's the problem and also the solution. So
yes, that's right.
It's all connected. So we're going to talk about the health of the Great Barrier Reef and how it's reported in the media. Now, one of the ways that we can get scientific data about the health of the Great Barrier Reef is from the Australian Institute of Marine Science, or AIMS for short. AIMS is staffed by scientists who have been carrying out comprehensive annual in-water surveys of the Great Barrier Reef since 1985. And the position statement on their website states that climate change is the greatest threat to the long-term future of coral reefs. Warming ocean temperatures and ocean acidification increase the vulnerability of coral reefs to coral bleaching, diseases, and tropical cyclones. Of course, anyone who's been listening to our show will already know that, because every single one, pretty much, of the 50-plus experts we've interviewed has said the same things.
That's right.
And it's a well-established fact. But, of course, the average person isn't going to go and read a 20-page scientific report every year to find out the latest update on how the reef's health is tracking. So all that scientific information ends up getting filtered through the media, sometimes with concerning results. So, Dr. McCatter, your investigation started with AIMS's 2022 Reef Health Report and the accompanying media release. So what was in that media release, which the media latched onto?
Yeah, so the release itself led with a title that was highest coral cover in the central and northern reef in 36 years. So that really did foreground this idea that the reef was recovering, and also the first three paragraphs of the media release emphasised this historic increase in coral coverage, but the fourth paragraph did go on to mention that there were decreases of coral coverage elsewhere, and then there was more information that said that the coral growth remained extremely vulnerable to future stresses and so on. But the key issue here is that many people, most people, and we've all done this, we all do this all the time, we glance at a headline. We may read the first 2-3 paragraphs, and so the message that formed and was spread as a result of that media release was one that was perhaps quite different from what AIMS might have intended to travel through media.
Yeah, that's that whole clickbait thing, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, people didn't read down far enough to see the clarifying information, which is, you know, despite this climbing coral cover, there's a lot of qualifying information about that.
We had that issue a couple of years ago, didn't we, when they made the report that the reef's fine now because we've got the biggest coverage of staghorn acropora coral that we've ever had.
Yeah, this is the one.
Yeah, and then everyone went, oh, it's fixed. And we went, no.
That's right. And just to add, you know, this is also, you know, an issue with media, because in this sort of time-pressured 24/7 media cycle that we are part of, media releases are sometimes the only source that journalists have on a particular story on a particular day. They have little time, and they may, whether willingly or not, reproduce the frames that they receive through media releases such as the one that we're talking about. So it's quite easy for such framing, you know, the way that AIMS foreground of the recovery, for that to travel through media and to neglect the backstory, the whole story. And so that strategic framing of the organisation that's communicating can be produced quite uncritically in media outputs, and that's exactly what happened in the case that we were looking at.
Yeah, I've studied media, I've had a lot to do with the media, and when they're on a tight deadline, if someone sends them a media release, sometimes, they just slap it in the paper without researching it further, sometimes.
Maybe that's why things have changed over the years at work, with how massive social media has become over the past decade, that people are only getting that little quick snapshot.
Oh, yeah.
And it can change depending on how quickly you scroll.
Absolutely.
It's completely different.
Yeah, when people only get micro doses of information in a less than 1 minute reel, that's one way to learn, but the real details come from a 40-minute podcast episode.
There you go, or a 25-minute coral show.
At the Cairns Aquarium.
That's right.
People need to dive deeper, so
Yes,
that's why
they do.
any legend who chooses to listen to something in depth for 40 minutes is an absolute hero in my book.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, especially this day and age.
Diving beneath the headlines to really understand an issue. So, Dr. McCatter, after AIMS released this report and the accompanying media release, you analysed how it was covered in the media. So what sort of things did you discover?
So the study was sparked by several of us listening to the evening news. For myself, it was on the way home, and I heard an item on the ABC that highlighted that there had been extraordinary, to use the framing that they utilised then, coral growth on the Great Barrier Reef. And I then very shortly heard from some colleagues of mine saying, "Did you hear that news item?"
Oh, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've heard nothing else.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so this was in 2022, and so some of us came together. So we're a group of marine scientists, data scientists, media specialists, and also Great Barrier Reef policy specialists, and we decided that we really wanted to investigate what was going on here and how we were hearing these news stories about so-called recovery of the Great Barrier Reef. So we did just that. And so we went out and we collected and analysed 28 media articles that referred to that coral coverage report that came from AIMS in 2022. And they were across 7 different countries. And we just were following basically how that information from this particular report released about the state of coral growth and the health of the Great Barrier Reef in 2022, how information about that travelled across first mainstream news media. So 28 articles over the week, the 7 days that followed, and then we also followed that information through social media. So we looked at then Twitter, and we collected and analysed 59,586 tweets, which referred to the Great Barrier Reef in the 28 days after the news was released, and we followed what happened in that information on social media. So what we did discover was that there was a really clear and close association between this reef recovery framing, so-called, and news reporting that neglected to fully lay out the continuing and ongoing and very serious threats to the reef. And we saw that first in the mainstream media online news coverage. And then when we looked at the social media content, we found that the media that tended to use the AIMS framing of reef recovery then went on to question the legitimacy of climate science and actually the threat of climate change to the reef at all, despite, as we know and as you've said and as we all agree on, the irrefutable and critical threat to the GBR that remains from climate change. So there was this really close relationship between echoing narrative of recovery and casting doubt on climate science, especially in social media, or not fully reporting the threats to the reef in online mainstream media.
Yeah, it's just not something that you can explain in a quick reel, is it?
It's a science. It's science.
It's
complex. It's nuanced. And it's totally understandable. And there's nothing wrong with being optimistic and looking at the glass half full and saying, well, we've got some regrowth happening here. But when the media, or some sections of the media, use that to argue that climate change isn't real and the reef is completely fine.
I could not believe how much of an effect that had and how quickly people grabbed hold of that the next week at work.
Yeah. Straight away, you notice.
Straight away. Like, people would come up to me and go at the touch tank and they go, oh, so we're not really worried about the reef anymore because I read the other day it's coming back. And I just go, I
guess we better go pour some more petrol on the flames then because everything's fine.
I think you need to come to my show, all right? Come with me.
Yes. So they really made you work harder for you, didn't they?
Oh, yeah.
So, Dr. McCatter, let's clear up the misconceptions that came out of that 2022 report. Since climate change is causing increasing threats to coral reefs, what is the real explanation for the increasing coral cover that was reported by AIMS in their 2022 report?
So, as I said, I am not a marine scientist, but we worked with marine scientists on this paper, on this study, and the conclusion was that the period between August 21 and May 22 was a time where there were few acute stresses to the GBR, so there were no major cyclones and there weren't prolonged periods of high temperatures given La Nina conditions, and so that's why coral coverage was able to increase on the northern and central reefs. Mm-hmm. But as you mentioned earlier, this increase was largely driven by the fast-growing Cropera genus of corals, which is a beautiful-looking coral, but it's one of the ones that's most susceptible to wave damage when there are cyclones, and it's also more susceptible to bleaching from marine heat waves. And it just happens to be the preferred prey for crown-of-thorns starfish as well. So having more of that particular coral doesn't make a less vulnerable reef. And there's also some evidence that outbreaks of crown-of-thorns starfish reduce coral cover in the southern reefs of the GBR over the same period that we're talking about. So overall, although there was some increased coral growth, the reef as a whole was by no means recovering and still remained highly vulnerable, which the AIMS report did say, but only further down in that media release, of course.
The order of the information is important. So the world is currently in I think its third year of a global coral bleaching event. More than 80 countries have experienced coral bleaching in their waters. More than 80% of the world's coral reefs have bleached. So you can pick a certain area where it increased to focus on, or you can look at the bigger picture, which is an overall decline in reef health. Now, really important to note that there were 2 more bleaching events since this 2022 report. So any of the regrowth that was experienced in 2022 has potentially been arrested and impacted by 2 more bleaching events since then, including 2024, which was the worst coral bleaching on the reef ever, and which affected 75% of the Great Barrier Reef. Yet people continue to come to us quoting that report from 2022.
I know.
Saying the reef is growing, it's better than ever. And it's like, that's old now. There's been 2 more bleaching events since then, but they will just cling on to
I heard it the
anything.
other day. I literally heard it the other day again. I remember when it came out at work and the people were just swamping me, and I'm thinking it's just so important for the media to be so careful when they report this sort of stuff. It can cause, just for a fleeting moment, I thought, you know what, I've just gone back. All that hard work that we've done has just gone back a few years. Just because of that very quick headline where people have gone, we don't need to worry about, it's fine. Well, no. But it did open up that topic of discussion. So any time that someone can come up and bring that subject up, then I can change their way of thinking and give them the real story as a bonus as well. So there's both sides to it.
Yeah, and don't we still hear about it? Because yes, the Great Barrier Reef is still an incredible, beautiful system. I love going diving on it, swimming with the turtles and fish and everything whenever I get a chance. But the fact is that it is severely threatened by climate change. And whenever we try to teach people about that fact and how important it is for people to take this problem seriously and take action on it, to be constantly getting these objections from people calling out from the crowd and saying, I've heard on the news that the Great Barrier Reef is growing and it's bigger and better than ever.
And this is something that I hear at work every day for the past 8 years, But what I've found during these shows at the aquarium since we've opened is that the rhetoric has changed now. So it's gone from, I heard this, so it must be true, and then I teach them something else, to, can you please give me the real story? Please tell us what's really happening and just cut to the chase.
So there's people who have latched on to the everything is completely fine narrative, and then there's the doom and gloom narrative, which is probably a bit too pessimistic because we still have healthy reef there, it's not all dead. And then there's everyone that's read both and then just ends up completely confused.
I think that's where they're at the moment. They've put it in a bucket, thrown it in the air and gone, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know who to believe. So we stand in front of them and go, this is exactly what's happening.
So it's totally understandable to be optimistic. We want to talk about the corals that are regrowing. We want to talk about how the reef can spawn and reproduce and repopulate. We want to talk about all the beautiful things that are still there. But if you see the media latching onto any of that as a sign that there's nothing to worry about and we can continue to pollute with abandon, Gabby, why is that so concerning? Why should we actually be really worried about this?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, as you all well know, this problem is not just something faced by our Great Barrier Reef, but coral reefs worldwide are under severe threat, as we know, and climate change is, of course, causing more frequent marine heat waves and increased sea surface temperatures, and that's, of course, resulting in reef-damaging coral bleaching. And we know that on the GBR, repeated bleaching events combined with water pollution from land and cyclones and the crown of thorns starfish have led the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority to declare in 2019 that the 5 to 25-year outlook for the reef is actually really, really poor, which is not good news. And, you know, we've seen bleaching on Ningaloo Reef as well, so we know this is something that affects all around Australia. And the long-term climate projections are really bleak for reefs overall, for reefs globally. So even if we were able to achieve the Paris Agreement goal of no more than 1.5 degrees of heating above pre-industrial levels, which we are already surpassing, possibly temporarily, but, you know, the signs aren't looking good. We may well arrive at 2.7 degrees heating by 2100 on current trajectory.
If we don't take urgent action, I want to emphasise we can still turn this around. But, yeah, what's going to happen if we stay on this current trajectory? Yeah,
so even at 1.5 degrees heating, the vast majority, so that's about 70 to 90% of tropical coral reefs will be lost. And if we have warming of over 2 degrees or more, which we currently seem to be on the trajectory for, then it's just an awful statistic to have to cite, but more than 99% of tropical reefs will actually cease to exist.
I can't even bring that into my 3D.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Obviously, we already know that, but every time we have to focus on it, it's heartbreaking. Yep. Look, it's important not to lose hope, because even if we are locked in to losing a lot of our coral biodiversity and a lot of our coral reefs, every fraction of a degree, it matters. So every single thing we do will be able to make a difference. Every fraction of a degree of warming that we stop could be one more species of coral that we save. So it's important to maintain that hope that there's still a lot to protect, and every single thing that we do matters and can make a difference. And I think that's really important to remember. For me, like, until there's only one coral left in the ocean, there is still something left to fight for, that we should be putting in all our efforts towards protecting it.
And I think the general public that I see at work, they care about it, and it's a mixed balance of being able to tell them why it's happening, how bad it is, but we can fix it, and also focus on the hard work that thousands of scientists and experts in their field behind the scenes are working tirelessly to try and fix the problem. So a little bit of encouragement helps them change the way that they do things as well.
Well, that's the thing. Whoever's listening to this, you're not alone. No. You're among thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of people who care about this and who want to take action. And when we take action together, that's when we've seen big shifts throughout history. I mean, we're already doing a lot better as a result of climate negotiations between the countries. So our emissions trajectory has reduced since the Paris Agreement was signed, and a lot of countries are rapidly phasing out fossil fuels and transitioning to renewables. Australia is now 40% renewable powered, and that's a lot further along than we were a few decades ago. So things are already going a lot better than they would have if we hadn't have all got together and acted. And I want people to take heart on that we need to just keep doing that.
Just keep chipping away.
And, none of us are alone. We can do this together. Yep. So join together with other people who care. Join a climate action group, and you'll find that we can actually make a difference. So it's really important to note that the Great Barrier Reef is still absolutely beautiful.
She's beautiful, yes.
If someone comes to me and says, hey, do you want to jump on my boat and go for a dive? I'm not going to say no.
Yes.
I'm going to be like, yes, please. Yep. I've been on thousands of dives on the Great Barrier Reef, and I will still jump in a heartbeat to go and see it. It's just stunning. There's turtles everywhere. There's acropora, like we've just mentioned, are the ones which are growing back quickly, and lots of fish and sharks and all kinds of things.
It's also important to note to people that are listening in 91 countries, I might add, Great Barrier Reef is bigger than Japan.
Mm-hmm. It's almost as big as Germany.
Yeah, one major issue in one northern, southern or central section might not be as bad in the other one, but the whole thing is suffering in general, but just keep in mind that she is gorgeous. She needs people to come and have a look at her and learn as much as they can. So please keep coming.
Yeah, we've talked about it a lot in previous episodes. Make sure you go check them out. One of the best things you can do to help protect the reef is to come and visit, because you will be supporting the coral planting and the scientific surveys and all of those things that they're helping the reef with. And you'll also learn firsthand about it and see a whole bunch of turtles and Shane the Maori wrasse, or his ocean-going cousins.
Wazza, the turtle who just got released, he's back out there.
So I guess it's a story of we still have so much left to protect, and it's like what we do right now gets to decide whether we get to keep what we still have. And the tour operators are doing a great job. They're taking people to the parts of the reef that are still healthy. Like Brett said, the reef is so huge, different parts are affected differently. The extent and severity of bleaching differs depending on the species. Some species are more resilient than others, and the depth. So if you swim along the drop-off and look down 2 or 3 metres, you'll see healthy corals which got a bit more shade and were a bit further away from that heat. And certain reefs, because of currents, they're looking good, some reefs. But the overall picture is one where we need to take urgent action and not be complacent and say, well, a few corals grew back in 2022, so there's nothing we need to worry about.
I still get heart palpitations when I hear that. It just brings me nightmares.
Sorry, Brett, we're stressing you out with this episode. Yeah, and so what we are seeing, though, is a loss of biodiversity. So the more vulnerable corals might be dying out due to these bleaching events, whereas some species which are more resilient to heat are still hanging on. So we still have a lot of corals, we still have a lot of beauty, but gradually we're losing biodiversity, and that's a big risk. And eventually, if we don't take action now to turn things around, then we will get to the point where even those resilient corals, those heat-tolerant corals, will eventually get to the point where it's too much for them as well. So the need to care about this and learn about it and take action remains really important. Dr. McCatter, what are some of the reasons why the media sometimes struggles to get it accurate about reef science?
Such a good question, and such a huge one as well, because we all know what a gargantuan beast the media are these days in all their forms, including social media. It's such a difficult landscape to navigate, but that's what we do. That's what I study. So I'll make a few points here. So I think that sometimes media may lose the nuance of scientific findings by cherry-picking particular pieces of information in order to attract people's attention, their audience's attention. So they will take particular little pieces of information and highlight those in order to appeal to their audiences more. And also things like science information being quite a small portion of news overall. It's often written by non-subject specialists in newsrooms, and because of that, it can sometimes be oversimplified when it's translated for audience consumption, if you like.
Absolutely. I mean, to be a journalist, you don't need to be a reef scientist, so anyone that's reporting on it might not really know that much about the Great Barrier Reef. And I mean, that's okay. Like, journalists can't be expected to be an expert on everything, but it does mean I've definitely had them report things that were completely inaccurate through to just a little bit mistaken.
Yeah, so what I'd be right in saying is just get that headline and just get clicks. You just got to put that whatever headline they can there just to get that person to click and open it. Do they get extra credit for the amount of people that open and click this stuff?
Well, it depends on the media organisation. Yeah. I also do not encourage an attitude that's quite prominent nowadays, which is, will I avoid the media completely? Sometimes people say that, because then you're going to be a complete ignoramus. You won't know anything about what's happening in the environment or the world. Don't go and live under a rock and ignore what's happening in the real world. But you just need to become media literate, and that means understanding how to recognise what is reliable information and where they're getting that information from. But anyway, that's probably a whole separate episode. Sorry for interrupting, Dr. McCatter.
That's good. I fully agree with you, and I'm so glad you brought up the point about media literacy, which I strongly believe is closely linked to our understanding of climate change overall. So we can talk about that another day. I'd love to.
Yep.
But, there's also, of course, the thing that we all know very well, which is that messages about science can become politicized in the way that they travel behind the scenes through all the production processes that, information and messages go through in the media on their way to travel to audiences. And so that's really prominent here as well, I think. And then there's also this concept of news values. How do journalists decide what becomes news out of all the information that's out there? What actually can become news? And one of the key news values is novelty and also conflict. And novelty, I think, the news value of novelty and knowing that, something that is novel can become news that travels and that gets more clicks, as you said, can lead journalists and other media professionals to pursue those kind of splashy or clickbait headlines. Mm-hmm. And that might lead to them extrapolating or overstating or cherry-picking the findings of scientific reports. And so in this context, sometimes in the context of climate change in particular, it might include emphasizing climate contrarianism and minimising key impacts in the reporting. And then finally, of course, there's the issue of deliberate misinformation, which we are certain was present in the sample of social media tweets that we used. And so we know that the message from Ames was hijacked somewhat in the interests of climate science denial as it travelled through the long tail, as we say, of the internet. So absolutely, deliberate misinformation, disinformation plays a really strong part here. But the balance is to find how to release science news in a way that doesn't play into the hands of those that seek to use it for disinformation and misinformation.
Mm-hmm. Which leads really well into my next question, which is, as a science communication expert, do you have any advice for scientific organisations about how they can communicate complex scientific data like this to the media and the public to make sure that it isn't getting misconstrued?
Yes, good question.
Yeah, a few things. I think that it's really important that there's a close working relationship between communications teams that put out these kind of media releases and the scientists themselves, that they go back and forth and they think really carefully about how they construct those messages that then become, that travel across media and potentially become simplified as they do so. And so I think that calls for maybe something like training in misinformation proofing for communications teams, and so that they are really, and I'm sure they do this, and this is not a statement of blame at all, but it's just a statement that in this day and age we need to be even more careful about how we frame pieces of information when we release them, so that they can't be used to emphasise the wrong position on climate change. And also that those that are constructing these messages aren't tempted to put out something that perhaps will be a little bit more splashy as it travels through the media. By that I mean that it is more clickbaity. There might be a particular message that might catch people's attention, as you said, as we've all seen that it did, that we, all of us as communicators, resist that temptation when we really want to report the reality of the issue here.
Yeah, very good advice. So what tips do you have for our listeners to help them improve their ability to discern accurate information from misinformation? I think that's probably the topic of a whole entire show.
Yeah, there's another one.
Our media literacy show. We'll pin that one for 2026.
Episode 75.
In a nutshell,
Dr.
McCabe.
That's great. Happy to do that with you. I think really importantly, there is a lot of good information out there. So we need to educate ourselves about climate science and other key issues, really, that impact our world today. Sometimes it's probably quite clear what those really kind of hard-hitting and trustworthy probably websites are, but there are other sources of information as well. But there's a plethora of good information on the internet. So we need to sort of do our due diligence and become well educated on issues that impact all of us today, like climate change. I also think it's really important for all of us to consider before we share, before we comment, before we click on something, look at who's posting and what maybe their motivation might be for this particular post if it's in the social media world. Is it even a human? Because we know that misinformation is spread by bots these days.
Yeah, AI is rife.
Absolutely. So we need to be really aware of all those threats. So it's really important to be media savvy, to be media literate. And as I say, I think climate literacy and media literacy are very closely intertwined. After all, if we were all well educated on climate change, we would be further along the way to solving the problem. But most people, and research shows this, most people understand climate change and have their information of climate change provided to them through the media. So it really is the key site for changing the narrative on climate.
Yeah, and look at who's funding these media sources, because if you've got a media source that's got a big ad for a fossil fuel company, think about what sort of narrative they're going to contain compared with media sources that perhaps are taxpayer funded, which means that they're working for us. They serve us.
I think also the bonus of it is, I see people coming to work, and I think overwhelmed is probably the best word I could use to describe it when they come up to me. They're just overwhelmed with all of this different information that's in their face all the time. And then they listen to the show and they go, they just take a big breath and go, thanks. Cut all the noise out. Yeah,
which leads to a really great question for you, Dr. Mokata. How important do you think something like a podcast could be to dealing with this problem?
Well, I think really important and fantastic. I mean, across your 91 countries, this is a wonderful platform, and it's a way to really tease out some of these tangled problems. I absolutely applaud you on the work that you're doing, and it's a privilege to be here to speak with you. So absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
Podcasting.
Oh, thank you.
Platform.
Thank you. Well, we're honoured to have you on the show. I think, a really important topic is that balance between maintaining hope, I guess, and having some optimism, because it's important not to tell people, well, everything's fine, so we don't need to take action. But we also don't want to tell people that all hope is lost, do we, Dr. Mokata? Like, as a science communication technique,
you've got to sort of
telling people that it's just all hopeless is not an effective technique, is it?
No, goodness.
No, absolutely, I agree. And it's something that there's a lot of research in. We know very well that what affects gain framing versus loss framing, if I can use that phrase, so framing a story in terms of what we stand to gain from responding to climate change quickly, which we must do, versus framing it in terms of everything we stand to lose from climate change. That is an important distinction. I think also, absolutely, I agree with you that just concentrating on the negative and making it seem as if the battle is already lost against climate change, that is very unhelpful as well.
It's not accurate. It's not accurate. It's not lost.
It's not accurate.
No.
And we need to be motivated for this work ahead. So I really love to look to the thinking of Christiana Figueres, who was one of the architects of the Paris Agreement back in 2015. You might know her. She's a fellow podcaster. She has a wonderful podcast called Outrage and Optimism.
Oh.
And I think I really like that framing of how we should gird ourselves for this really important task of dealing with climate change. Each one of us, we should do it with outrage and we should do it with optimism. Outrage that we're in the situation, and optimism that, yes, we do have the tools and we are moving in the right direction and that we can deal with this issue. And perhaps even the world might become a better place and more equal and fairer for those who currently are most vulnerable to many of the issues that we're seeing today that make people suffer more from climate change. So let's be optimistic and let's get to work.
Yeah, well said.
Optimistic and get to work. That perfectly sums it up. Now, for any listeners who are wondering, what can I do to help protect the Great Barrier Reef and our oceans in general from climate change and coral bleaching, please go back and check out Season 2, Episode 11, which is called How to Save the Ocean, Taking Meaningful Action on Climate Change. I promise that episode is going to leave you feeling hopeful, empowered, and motivated with real tangible actions you can take to make a difference. A major theme that we've repeated often throughout this show is that you don't need to be a diver or a marine biologist or even live anywhere near the ocean to make a difference to help protect it. Psychology research has found that one of the most effective ways to tackle environmental grief and anxiety is to take action with, for example, a climate action group. You'll meet other people who are doing amazing things and making a real difference and who will inspire you, and you can be part of the solution yourself. In the show notes, I've listed some groups who are doing amazing things for our oceans, so please check them out or search for a climate action group in your area wherever you are in the world. Thanks so much for helping us protect our incredible Great Barrier Reef. Sadly, that's all we have time for today and for this year. So Dr. Gabby Mokata, climate social scientist, Thanks for all your amazing work, and thanks so much for joining us on Word on the Reef today.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me. Great talking with you.
Thank you so much. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Have a great weekend. And thanks to you, all our listeners, for joining us on Word on the Reef this year with me, Tanya Murphy, and co-host Brett Goodman. This is actually our final show for 2025 before we head off for a few weeks break. But don't worry, we will be back in February next year with more of the world's best marine science adventures.
We will.
Once again, thank you so much to everyone for your support this year. It's been a huge year, 40 shows.
Wow.
You're all legends.
You're amazing.
And all the best fishers for the holiday season, Kurabana, wet season, whatever you may call it. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at instagram.com/Word on the Reef podcast. That's all for this year.
Hey, Merry Christmas, everybody.
Best fishers. And see you next year.
See you next year. Bye.